Bono and Maria Costabile. It's a pleasure to be invited by three such dear friends and colleagues, and appreciate the honor you've given me to be the opening keynote speaker. I wish I could be with you in Bari. I've been to Bari in the past and enjoyed the warm Italian hospitality with a memorable dinner where one wonderful course of food followed another. Even when I thought it was all done, there was still more to come. And that's the spirit of Bari, that it's generous and warm. So I appreciate that. I appreciate Gabrielle Kotz's introduction and her leadership for ACM. I've been a long-term ACM member, and it is my home base. So that's a very strong part of my life. But so is IFIP and Interact Conference, where I've been in the past, and I hope to be in the future. Behind me, you see the picture of the University of Maryland's beautiful new Brendan Aree building for computer science and innovation. It's our new home at the University of Maryland. And so I'm proud to represent my colleagues at the University of Maryland and the Human Computer Interaction Lab, where, as Catherine said, together we worked closely for 30 years and produced collaboratively more than 100 papers together that were co-authored. And the field of human computer interaction has had many, many wonderful improvements and developments over the years. And that's been a pleasure to see as well. And so today, I'm talking about, in the spirit of Bari's innovation and of our innovation, of looking at a new direction for HCI, and it's a change to say HCAI. So that's the theme of the talk today, and let's go to the slides. Okay, and let's begin. So I welcome you on behalf of the University of Maryland and Interact Conference. And the theme for today is human-centered AI. And the central question is, what is human-centered AI? That's really the question. For me, it has many parts to it. It's a set of processes by which we study the users, the user-centered design process, design thinking, observation, ethnographic studies, and we learn what the user wants. Now, it's one of two ways of advancing technology. One is to study the needs of the users. The other is to study the technology. And we've seen many products that come from one or the other. And the goal for human-centered AI is to apply the novel and powerful, powerful technologies that have come in the last decades from the artificial intelligence community and have matured in the past decade through the methods of machine deep learning and now called foundational models, these new directions that are bringing new powers for designers. And so we want to put that technology and the user-centered approach together to build tools, services, products that will make people's lives better. And our goal always is to amplify, augment, empower, and enhance people. Our focus is on people. That's the central idea. We want to make the world a better place. We want to make people stronger, build their sense of self-efficacy, their responsibility for their action, their creativity, and their social connections. That's really the goal of what human-centered AI is all about. So that's a great philosophy, and we hear a lot of discussions of the ethics and the philosophy of these things. But the question that I ask is, how will we bridge the gap between ethics and practice? How will we actually bring about significant changes in the design of products and services? And so there are three parts to this talk, and they're described in the paper as part of the Interact proceedings. And you can take a look further, and there are three central papers. And as I'll say at the end, this is the core of the book that I've just completed. Page proofing. It will appear in January 2022 from Oxford University, called Human-Centered AI. So that HCAI framework is a new way of thinking. And I go back to the old ways of thinking. 40 years ago, Tom Sheridan and Bill Verplank, I hope both known to the Interact community, developed the notion of levels of automation, And the belief was that you had to choose a balance point between the levels of automation and the levels of human control. In Tom Sheridan's plan for the levels, levels went from 0 to 10. 0 is total human control, 10 was total machine control. And that idea has remained strong. And it's something I even adopted in the first edition of my book, Designing the User Interface, that you had to choose a point somewhere between human control and computer automation. And if you got more computer automation, you had less human control. And that idea of a zero-sum game has remained strong with many people. But I became uncomfortable with that idea in the years that followed this first edition. And in later editions, I changed the language to saying ensuring human control while increasing automation. Now that sounds like a little puzzle if you're stuck in the old idea of how to design computers and that you had to give up control to get more automation. But I became more and more aware that actually there were two possibilities, that two scales instead of one, that you could go from low to high human control, and you could go from low to high computer automation. And the goal became to make a more nuanced, careful design, which chose some features that humans wanted to maintain control over, and to give them that control through the user interface. And then for the features where the computer could be reliable, safe, and trustworthy, we would let the computer take over that. The best example would be the digital camera, where you as the user point the camera at what you want, you zoom where you want, and you click for your decisive moment. At the same time, the AI and the computer system are in the background, making sure that the aperture and the focus and the lighting and the reduction of hand jitter, all were taken care of automatically. And that became the right blend. High levels of human control for the things that matter, high levels of computer automation that could be reliably, safely, and trustworthy done. Digital cameras are familiar and common. We'll take a look at other examples that demonstrate this rich possibility of how you could combine. But the HCAI framework, as I looked at these two dimensions, to me had more messages. And so I moved to a two-dimensional model rather than the one-dimensional levels of automation, and suggested that you could have low to high automation and low to high human control. And we have examples of each. We have high levels of computer control for a pacemaker that's embedded in your chest, or an airbag which has to be deployed in your car in 200 milliseconds to be successful. Those have to be rapid, they have to be accurate, they have to be as automatic as possible. At the same time, we're places where we have human mastery. We want to ride our own bicycle, we want to play the piano, we want to make mistakes, we want to try something creative, we want to do something, we want to become more expert, more self-efficacious. Now, the place where design becomes most strong is in the quadrant I call reliable, safe, and trustworthy, where I mentioned the digital camera, but the elevator also is an example where there's a high degree of AI, automation, and algorithms controlling the elevators, especially in large office or apartment buildings. But the user is in control of what they care about. They press the button to call for the elevator, the light goes on, the elevator arrives, the doors open, they choose the 6th floor, the light goes on in the button, the doors close, and they see that they're on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th floor, and the doors open. It's all predictable, controllable, and comprehensible. And it's a safe and reliable and trustworthy system. So that's happened over many decades, century of use, and that's what we want to learn how to do. Now, at the same time, this HCAI HCAI framework also warns about two things that were not in Sheridan and Verplancke's original model. There are dangers of excessive automation, where you put too much control into the computer. The prime example, of course, is the Boeing 737 MAX airplane, which had two crashes 2 years ago, two tragic crashes that took the lives of 346 people. And the problem there was that the designers were so engrossed in the idea that the system could be autonomous, fully automated, that they did not even tell the pilots of the existence of this system, which would drive the nose of the plane down when necessary to avoid stalling. Now, the angle of attack indicator sensor failed, and the system then pointed the plane down. The pilots tried 20 times in the 12 minutes from takeoff to try to bring the plane up, but ultimately it crashed, causing this tragic result. And so there are times of excessive automation. This is a visible and highly famous story, but there are many others with self-driving cars and with many other devices which fail. And so we have to be careful about excessive automation, and that requires care and design. There's also the dangers of excessive human control. If we allow humans to do whatever they want, they can cause danger. So the most familiar example is your oven. If it has a self-cleaning feature and you put the self-cleaning on, once the temperature goes above 600 degrees Fahrenheit, you're prevented from opening the door because that would be dangerous. And these kind of interlocks are common in human factors world, in aviation, in automobiles, and many other well-done design cases. So it's important to understand the range and the nuanced details of human and machine control. We can look at this for example in a medical device. The morphine drip bag from 75 years ago delivered morphine drops at a continuous rate, but that had some dangers because the patient could get too much morphine and die, or the patient could get not enough morphine and would be suffering in pain. The movement was towards an automatic dispenser, which would limit the amount of morphine based on patient heart rate and breathing rates, and so on. And then the movement to human control was to provide a trigger for the human patient to press to say, give me more morphine to reduce the pain. But there was a limitation to how much morphine they could dispense so that it would keep them safe. The future will be a patient-guided but clinician-monitored system, and you might envision a hospital control room which monitored 50 or 100 of these devices to supervise them all at once and make sure that they were operating properly, and if not, they could intervene. So that's for pain control designs. We might look at the idea of a wheelchair designs. The old-fashioned pushchair required a caretaker to push it. Robotic devices move the wheelchair automatically. Hand-powered or user-guided ones gave users control and mastery and led to such excitements as wheelchair basketball and other sports competitions. The future is in the reliable, safe, and trustworthy direction of motorized, joystick-controlled, teleoperated, and programmable. There's many improvements that are possible when we blend the ideas of human control and computer automation. Okay, so that's the HCAI framework, but the second part, the second innovative idea is to think about the design metaphors that we use. And this became also increasingly aware, I became increasingly aware of the way that computers were represented in our society. And we began to think of robots as friends, social robots, and we thought about intelligent devices. And the current language and imagery is to show computers as human-like robots. And here is what I see as the two possible design metaphors, the categories. So there's the old world, which talks about intelligent agents, that are thinking machines and knowledgeable, that wants to build teammates who are collaborators and partners and co-workers. And they want to see assured autonomy of machines that work entirely on their own. And the belief is the future will bring us social robots that are human-like, humanoid, android, bionic, or bio-inspired. And that's what the general dialogue is. And the imagery is often of a hand, a robot hand shaking a human hand, or a full life-size humanoid robot. I don't think that is the future. I think there's another future of what I will call super tools, telebots, control centers, and active appliances. These are less exciting than the older language. I mean, if we could have an intelligent agent that was a reliable teammate and a friendly social robot, maybe we would like that. But I don't think we can build those. I don't think we want those. What I think we want is to ensure human responsibility, creativity, and control. And that will come in the examples I'll show of super tools, telebots, control centers, and active appliances. There are opportunities to combine these designs, and we see successful products coming from that, such as voice user interfaces of Siri, Alexa, and so on, that combine some aspects of the human model with the idea of powerful user interfaces or super tools and active appliances. Let's take a look. So the reinforcement for this idea is others who contribute to it. Margaret Bowden, creativity researcher in England, wrote that robots are simply not people. She was very clear about it. And Joanna Bryson contributed her own form of saying that humans, not robots, are responsible agents. And that's the key idea, that responsibility will remain a human activity. Only the humans are liable, accountable, legally, and morally. And so there's a difference. I believe that computers are a different category than people. Some people suggest that computers are becoming like people. And in the future, maybe 100 years or 500 years, we will treat them as partners, as teammates, as collaborators, but I don't think so. I think the point is responsibility will remain in humans, and therefore we will have a increasingly clear recognition of the differences between people and machines. When we get to that, we then begin as designers to think of using the distinctive capabilities of computers, which are very different from what people are. They have sophisticated algorithms, huge databases, superhuman sensors, information abundant displays, and powerful effectors. And these distinct capabilities often get ignored if you buy into the social robot thinking of the older language. Third is the human creativity, that people are really special. They have passion, empathy, humility, and intuition. And we should encourage those and build on those and develop what is special about people, the distinctive capabilities of people, the distinctive capabilities of machines. And that brings us right back to the opening. Humans, not robots, are responsible agents, and robots are simply not people. When we have that in mind, we'll begin to see more clearly about the design. So I've already mentioned the super tool of the digital camera, and it provides an enormous number of features that allow the user to control what's happening in advance, to be able to set up the camera in the way they want, take the picture at the moment they want, and then afterwards to adjust, to change the lighting and the color and the shadows and the brightness and the luminance. And all those ways are ways in which we increase human control and creativity. And remember, digital cameras have another special feature. They encourage social connection. They make it easy to share photos. And so we've gone very quickly in 30 years from a world in which only 10% of the population was competent in taking photographs into a world where 90% of the population is making and sharing photos at a scale never dreamed of even 30 years ago. And so that's what's dramatically different. And this increase enables more people to be more creative more often. Another example of Supertool are navigation choices. Lots of AI embedded, but lots of human control. Here I've asked for a route to go from the White House in downtown Washington to the University of Maryland in College Park, just 8 miles away. And it gives 3 choices. That's the right kind of design. AI provides choices, but the humans decide on what to do. And the human selects it, they get a preview, and then they use the tool. And then they can interfere, they can change. It's not automated, it's not autonomous. It runs under human control. They can change their destination, they can change their path, they can vary as they like. Similar design strategies appear in the text completion and search query completion. I start typing University of Maryland, and I get a set of choices, which helps remind me of the possibilities, offers me choices. I can ignore them, or I can take them. Spelling correction is the same way, that it offers a choice, and then users can decide if they take it or they reject it. Users are in control. They amplify, augment, enhance, and empower people. Another super tool, Bloomberg's terminal. 300,000 people pay more than $20,000 a year to have this on their desk. It provides a huge amount of data to help them make financial or other decisions. And the data has been heavily processed by AI, natural language processing algorithms. And that data, that AI program takes 1.6 million articles a day and organizes them in the ways that will make them most valuable to the user. The data is presented in an information abundant style that could not be presented by a voice interface or by hand waving or movement of hands, but it shows the information at a high rate, and it provides spatially stable, non-overlapped tile displays, but under user control that they can shift around for their current tasks. So I think we'll see the idea of Bloomberg terminals for many applications emerging and being used widely. Active appliances are another notion. These seem like humble, modest, ordinary household devices, yet they are all becoming AI infused. They are all advertising now that they have AI algorithms to drive the designs and the choices that the users have. And so we'll see that, and these are active appliances. They don't just respond to what humans do. They sometimes initiate by programming, by sensors. If the temperature changes, if an intruder arrives, they can take initiative on their own. And that's what we want. But we want to have control and comprehension. We want to know how many more minutes are left to wash and dry the clothes. We want to know what's happening with the Roomba that we're using and where it will go next. That's the sense of human control. Even devices that we used to think about being autonomous, like a pacemaker, are now becoming user controlled. Current pacemakers allow the users to operate them from their iPhones, and then their clinicians can view, monitor, and track what's happening on tens of thousands of pacemakers, and thereby improve them because they have the data from them. And they have machine learning algorithms built into them to make the pacemakers perform as effectively as possible. I prefer the word Tele-Bot than autonomous robot. The Mars rovers from NASA have a great degree of autonomy, but again, very specific ones. They can move forward, they can avoid obstacles and avoid precipices. They can turn their antenna to a point in the right direction, turn the solar panels to get the optimum lighting. But there's a whole control room of people at NASA who are operating the device, who are making decisions, who are dealing with problems. We have to remember the world is complicated, that unexpected problems will frequently occur. You may know the story of the IBM effort on the Mayflower ship, the autonomous ship that was supposed to cross the Atlantic a few months ago. It started out, it made good progress, and then something broke in the engine equipment. and it was not possible for the ship to fix itself, and it had to return and be picked up by a host ship to bring it back and restore it. And we hope they'll continue this effort and make that a successful project as well. Telebots are also for robotic surgery. You'll see newspaper stories that say robot surgeons are doing the job, but the maker of this one, the Vinci surgical system from Intuitive, says robots don't perform surgery. Your surgeon performs surgery with Vinci by using instruments that he or she guides via a console. That's the right idea. It's a human-operated device. Yes, it has powerful degrees of automation, allows physicians to get very precise movements deep into remote parts of the human body with only small incisions, and to do very powerful things that help improve patient health and make surgery safer and more effective. The control center idea is the other one. Instead of the autonomous system, you have the system that's remotely operated or controlled. Here in a hospital, monitoring the operations in the emergency room, intensive care units, and other parts of the hospital. That's the right idea. We want human involvement to give overviews of what's happening and understand patterns of failures so that we can reduce the number of failures. Similarly, other control centers for utilities or transportation have these kind of large centers where people work together side by side with a great deal of information around them that's shared, and they can operate and control the system as they want, like the air traffic control systems that have made civil aviation so successful and safe. All right, we come to the third principle here. Remember, the first was the HCAI framework, the two-dimensional view. The second were the change of design metaphors and the language we use. And the third is the governance structure. This is more complicated, but I'll just take part of it to give an example of the ideas that are in the idea of governance structures. So my overview of the 15 possibilities here are that there will be features of design of governance for teams, software engineering teams, maybe 5 to 15 people working together. And there may be many teams within an organization, and the organization will build a culture of safety. The safety culture includes the leadership commitment, the hiring and training of personnel, failures and near misreporting that allow them to watch what's happening and understand effectively what could be improved. The internal reviews that are careful and publicized internally, as well as possibly external reports as well, and the adherence to industry standards that have been developed as a consensus voluntary basis. So there may be many organizations or companies that constitute an industry. An industry would be transportation or medical care, manufacturing. And here we have methods of trustworthy certification. And so I'm a great believer in the importance of independent oversight, where the companies who develop machine learning algorithms, like Google and Facebook and Amazon, they say, Ben, our processes of review internally are very strong. You would be very impressed with how carefully we review what we do. And I am impressed. The growing set of procedures inside these companies of Google, IBM, Facebook, Microsoft, and so on, are very impressive and very thoughtful. However, still, independent oversight has a long history of demonstrated value. It's imperfect, but if we can add in a fresh set of eyes who have a different perspective than the developing organization or industry or company, then you get extra value, which is so important for life-critical and consequential applications where it really makes a difference. If you're building recommenders for e-commerce or playful game things, that's fine to do without independent oversight. But when you take on important things that affect people's lives, like job hiring, like mortgage granting, parole applications, then we want independent oversight. Now, this could come from several sources. It could come from the auditing firms, the four big ones, KPMG, Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Ernst & Young. And they are developing practices to help companies by auditing their AI processes. I think there's promise that insurance companies could also be helpful here, that they've had a good history in the building industry where insurance companies require adherence to the building code, and then they will grant insurance at a reasonable premium. Now, the current question is, what about the so-called self-driving cars? And I prefer they would be called safe driving cars, but the current term is self-driving or driverless cars. The question for the insurance companies now is, should they charge a higher premium or a lower premium for owners of self-driving cars? If they charge a higher premium, which said, oh, these cars are not so safe, then that would change the industry a great deal. But if they charge a lower premium, which said these cars are really safe, then that would accelerate the adoption of these self-driving or advanced driver cars. Now, for the moment, we're really not sure. There are famous stories of deaths through Tesla cars, but it's still an open question. As I began to look into this, I found, and I thought maybe there were just a few Tesla crashes that were deadly, maybe a dozen. But there's a website you can look at called tesladeaths.com, tesladeaths.com, that reports more than 200 deaths with Tesla cars. Now, those reports are incomplete. We don't know if the autopilot mechanism was on or not. And Tesla contests these and says that really their cars are safer according to their data. But we don't have full open access. The US National Transportation Safety Board did careful studies of some early crashes, and they did point to 13 recommendations that would improve the design of these safe driving cars. Recently, just 2 weeks ago, in the US, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration announced an investigation that was going to study 11 crashes of Tesla cars while on autopilot that crashed into first responder vehicles at the side or on roads at accident sites. And it did cause one death and several injuries. And so they're taking this seriously. And I hope this investigation will give us further understanding of what is happening. And that will also guide the insurance companies to know what they should charge in terms of higher or lower premium. Overall, the goal is, though, safe driving cars. Let's get that done first, and then we'll work towards the idea of self-driving cars. There's lots of roles for non-governmental organizations and civil society, as well as professional societies, such as the IEEE and IFIP, in advancing standards and groups and discussions of this. And then the last oval is the government regulation one, where while industry resists regulation, suggesting it would limit innovation, the evidence is quite different, that government regulation in many cases advances innovation, as it did for automobile fuel efficiency and safety. Once they were mandated, the companies got innovative and found new ways to do it. Similarly, in Europe, the GDPR regulation on privacy triggered a huge explosion of 10,000 papers about explainable AI. And it triggered innovation because it required that users of AI systems receive an explanation. So I could talk at length about these, but I'm going to focus just on the team aspects of software engineering and user interface design. And there are 5 aspects to this. From audit trails, one of my favorite and simplest ideas is that every robot should have a flight data recorder on it. Every automated system that's consequential and life critical should have a full detailed tracking history so that if problems arise, we can go back and understand them better. And in fact, the US National Transportation Safety Board investigation of the early Tesla crash in 2016 made exactly that recommendation, that more detailed audit trails were needed. I think this is a fascinating research problem, but the AI community has rejected that idea as a research issue. Trying to figure out what's needed to be recorded is an important goal. And then analysis tools to deal with the huge amount of data that's produced would be helpful. These other aspects are also important, which would lead to a longer discussion. I will focus on one example, explainable user interfaces, a topic that comes up in this Interact conference at several points. So the software engineering strategies for teams to create explainable user interfaces were triggered by the GDPR, but other efforts to understand what is that machine learning, deep learning algorithm doing so that the designers and the users would have a better understanding of what happened, especially if things went wrong. The general effort has been on retrospective explanations. That is, the user proposes a question or asks for a mortgage or asks for a parole or seeks to be hired. And the system then responds. And then the user may be confused or uncertain or not understand why. And so they can request explanations. And the large body of this research is about local versus global, whether you want a local explanation about your situation or global understanding of how the system works. But I came to see that there was a better way to think about this, that there was a new goal, which was to prevent confusion and surprise. That's what happened 30 years ago in the field of knowledge-based expert systems, where the shift went from those systems which had post hoc or retrospective explanations, and they shifted towards step-by-step processes that walk the user through a rule-based decision system where they understood each of the steps. So I suggest what I call prospective user interfaces that are interactive, visual, and exploratory. Let's take a look. Here's an example of a mortgage loan application, a very simplified model of a post hoc or retrospective report. The system suggests or asks you, invites you to enter the amounts to request mortgage. The mortgage amount requested $375,000, household monthly income $7,000, liquid assets $48,000. And then the user would be invited to press submit, in which case they would get an explanation. We're sorry, your mortgage loan was not approved. You might be approved if you reduce the mortgage amount requested, increase your household monthly income, or increase your liquid assets. Now, that's seen as a good example of a retrospective or post hoc explanation. And it actually gives some feedback about what you should do. But it's not really clear about how much you need to reduce the mortgage amount or how much you should increase your household income or increase your liquid assets. And which is the sensitive one about it? Which one makes a big difference? Which one makes only a small difference? But another design, a user interface design, might make that clearer. So this prospective user interface would allow users to move sliders. They could adjust $375,000 more or less in household monthly income and liquid assets. And then they see the score that they need to get approval, and they see their current score, and they see what the gap is, and they know how much they can move, how much they should move in order to get more blue on that score. Now, some people suggest this would invite exploration and cheating, but of course, users and mortgage applicants are required by law to provide accurate numbers. So they can't do that. And just as they would without any of these systems, they have to provide accurate information about their household monthly income. So this would give them a better understanding of how close they were, what they could change, and what it would take to achieve the mortgage they want. So I think there's a great opportunity, and I see more and more of these prospective user interfaces, even a simple one, a charming one from some British librarians about suggestions for novels. You get a set of sliders, and you can choose up to 4 of them, and you can go from funny to serious, from beautiful to disgusting, from no sex to explicit sex, from optimistic to bleak. And as you move the slider, the covers that are shown of the novels change. It's a delightful system. Check it out. I think you'll like it. Whichbook.net. Now, others do this as well. Here's a recommender control panel for music selection. You can choose 5 of the 14 sonify attributes: acousticness, instrumentalness, danceability, valence, and energy. And then immediately the items change on the screen, so you can see what's changed. And we've seen many of these occur in newspaper recommender systems where you have sliders for politics, sports, and entertainment. And as you adjust them, the 9 items that are recommended change rapidly so that you can see the impact of what you've done. The OECD has a Better Life Index, which looks at 190 countries. And again, you can control that by moving the sliders. So that's the 3rd strategy. And my summary here is to say, first is the HCAI framework. Think about, open your mind to the possibility of a microstructure, a fine structure of design in which you look at the features that you want to ensure human control to support creativity, and which features could be automated. And look for that upper right-hand quadrant of reliable, safe, and trustworthy that has high levels of automation and high levels of human control. The second issue to think about is the shift in metaphors and language from these older ones on the left, still very popular, and I know it's not easy to change, but these new ones on the right here open our minds as designers, as users, as to evaluators, as researchers, to new possibilities. And that will help. If you have better terms, let's hear them, but these are the 4 that I choose to focus on for my work. The third is the governance structures for human-centered AI. We can't do it all by simply design features of teams. We need to build organizations that have a culture of safety. We need to have industries where trustworthy certification is common and expected and seen as a competitive advantage. And finally, we will use government regulation when necessary. For those who want to dig further, there are 3 papers that have been published that cover these 3 topics. I'm pleased to see they've gotten warm responses very quickly. And there's a few other sources here. My own website covers these and other information about it, and the forthcoming book. I'm very pleased that this will appear in January 22 from Oxford University Press, and I've had very warm responses from people I respect. Alan Mackworth at University of British Columbia said the book is well structured, a delight to read. How nice. The coverage comprehensive, but it will be controversial. I think he's really got it right there. And others have also said very nice things about the book. The book has a structure to it. It focuses really on human values, the rights, justice, and dignity, the individual goals that I've mentioned during the talk: self-efficacy, creativity, responsibility, and social connections. And then the way we get this done is through reliable, safe, and trustworthy systems that are designed and governed by teams, organizations, industry, and government. All of that is built on the 3 foundations: the HCAI framework, the design metaphors, and the governance structure. At every point in thinking through design, you want to be aware of the stakeholders. Who are the users? Who are the researchers? Who are the developers? What are the business leaders thinking, and how can we help them decide? And what are the policymaker options? And at the same time, we must be aware that in building any of these systems, there are malicious actors who might seek to manipulate the system, as we've seen in many cases, and the cybercrime, political oppression, misinformation, manipulation of elections, advocacy of terror and hate groups. These are serious problems for which we have a strong responsibility for. The bias in the data is another large topic I've touched on only briefly in this talk, and then the flawed software that leads to incorrect results. And so those are the themes, that's the environment of the book, and that's the structure of the book. For those who want to know more, you can join our Google group, human-centered-AI, or follow our Twitter account, Human-Centered AI, and visit the website, which has starting information. Those will get you started and join the group, the growing group of people who are engaged in trying to shift from the old ideas to the new beliefs. And that's it. The message is, the takeaway message is, the future is human-centered. Thank you for your time and attention. I'll be glad to answer